Well, hello, Micah. It's December 1st, and I thought I would get out between our rain showers and check on what you like to call Turtle Island, but I have previously called Gilligan's Island in some of my videos, our turtle worm farm. And if you remember, we put an entire pumpkin in here, and I'm just gonna try to move the lid a little bit away so I can get closer to this edge. There you go. All right, so I'm sitting out here and I'm gonna check on this pumpkin. It was a big one. It was a big jack-o'-lantern, and I was a little concerned because pumpkins are very moist. I've peeked in here a few times and there were a lot of flies coming out of it. And look, we've now got sprouts. I actually think that's where we had the little mini pumpkin or gourd. I think it was not as sweet as the jack-o'-lantern type pumpkin. I think worms liked the jack-o'-lantern ones better. So I was a little concerned that this would make it too moist, but let's see how our worms are doing. Look at how mucky and even, look at how moldy the pumpkin is. There's the big stem. So let's just check up here on top. I spread the pumpkin out. You see any worms? Oh, I see something moving in there. I think I did put the burlap on top, and yeah, the worms are there. They are getting, well, they are into the pumpkin. There they are on the underside. I did put some nice dry leaves in here to try to soak up some of the moisture from the pumpkin. So here's the leaves that I put in, and look at the worms disappearing as I flip the leaves over. So the leaves seem to have done their job and soaked up some of the moisture. And look at the worms are all through the leaves. That must be nice and saturated with the sweet pumpkin juices. Lovely. I'm glad that worked because I didn't want to come out here and find this island soggy like the rest of British Columbia right now. I wanted to make sure that we get nice castings at the end of it and not just a muddy mess. Although, you know, even if it does go muddy, the garden won't mind. Let me turn over this bit. We'll see what's on this side. I see more sprouts. I see more worms into the leaves, which again would have all the microbes that come along with the leaves, as well as the sugary, sugar. Microbes like sugar. So the pumpkin is very sugary, and so it will feed the microbes in a accelerated way. They will get right into it. So let's go down to this moldy piece. It's on the edge, so I don't think the worms hang out as much on the edge, but oh, there they are under there. They are under there. I've been bolstering the population of this turtle worm farm with some native worms that I've been finding around the property underneath my plant pots and other things. And I must admit that I'm now second guessing some of my choices of worms that I've put in here, because I've looked them up and it's clear to me that I have put in, there's lots of worms up there, that I have put in some Canadian night crawlers. Now, they obviously will be able to feed on the pumpkin and the leaves and the manure and other things that we've put in here, but they are deep burrowing worms, and I'm not equipped to do it today, but my thinking is that I am, oops, sorry for the finger, that I am going to build a tower worm farm in the garden with open holes to the bottom of the bed, like, you know, so totally open to the bottom, through a series of holes, if not the entire bottom taken out of a bucket. And I'm going to put that in our raised bed. And I'm going to release any Canadian night crawlers that I see in my captive worm bins into that worm tower, into the garden. The Canadian night crawlers are perfectly adapted to live through the winter, well, as are these red worms, but I would be happier if they were free. So my next project is going to be free the Canadian night crawlers. And I'm just going to make sure nobody's getting into the stock there. I'm just going to make sure that as I see them in here, I catch them once we have this worm tower in the garden going, and I release them into the tower. So lots of moldy pumpkin here, worms spread out throughout onto the leaves and onto the pumpkin itself. So like I said, some of these worms were just from my worm farm. I harvested from the bottom drain tray where they migrate down anyway. So I got handfuls of them and put them in here. And then as I've been looking under my plant pots and whatnot, I've been harvesting more worms and adding them to here. And just in doing so, I've noticed that some of the worms are much larger, and that beautiful pale lilac with a peachy colored clitellum, and I'm thinking that that means they are Canadian night crawlers. So they're much larger, and they're deep worms. They probably, what they do, Micah, is they burrow deep into the soil, the garden, and they still come up to feed at the top, but they like establishing deep channels into the garden. So I've even got a piece of pumpkin over here. I tried not to put pumpkin everywhere in case it did overheat or something, but obviously the worms are in it and doing just fine. And look at this, our hanging basket liners, they're becoming less obvious. I actually think they are deteriorating. All right, well, speaking of deteriorating, obviously my hemp cloth is I'll grab that with my hand. Oh, there's worms on it. They love it. Love the hemp. So, look at them. Just hanging on the hemp. So what I'm going to do is I will fold those over. There's two pieces of hemp. Wow, this one was almost buried. I guess I've just been whipping out here and just doing cursory checkups. All right, so we're just going to try to Humpty Dumpty and put this back together. Before I put that piece of cardboard on, what I'm going to grab here is, this isn't aged bedding. What it is, though, I've got this bucket that I put some of our lovely BC rainwater. If you've been watching the floods, you know British Columbia had extensive floods recently, right, Micah? Lots of puddles. So I collected some of that lovely rainwater and I put it in this tub, and then I just put some shredded cardboard on it. So it is mildly damp. It is not, I guess at the bottom here it is wetter than elsewhere, but it is mostly on the dry side. Rainwater, I would assume, would have microbes in it. So even though this isn't my aged bedding in terms of you know, adding in a food source, a nitrogen source, and adding in you know, some old castings to get the microbes going, I would assume rainwater isn't sterile. It's got to have some biological action going in it. Oh, and there's even some rainwater still at the bottom. So, so it's been sitting in my house since about November 16th, and today's December 1st, so 2 weeks. And so I would assume that this has got some biological action going. I'm not going to add the rest of that rainwater because my goal with adding this little bit of cardboard was, you know, in a small way to counter all that pumpkin, both as a nitrogen source and as somewhat dry. And then I'm also, what I've been doing is sort of like Anne's lasagna bin from Plant Obsessed. I've just been putting cardboard on top, and so I'm gonna continue to do that. So you can see how much lower this bin is getting. So I'm building it up again, and then these hemp mats along with their worms are gonna go on top of this moist piece of cardboard. And I know there's a dry piece of cardboard underneath, but the hemp extends beyond the cardboard into the moisture of the bedding. So if the worms want to crawl out of the hemp, you know, mind you, there's leaves and all sorts of things stuck to the hemp. They could quite happily spend quite a bit of time there before they need to make their way back to the bedding. But anyway, they'll be able to find their way back without problem. And so there we go. There's our turtle done up for the next week or so. I'm glad to see the pumpkin is being eaten and that the bedding has been replenished. So we'll check in again in a while, and by then maybe it'll be time for another feeding. All right, Micah, hope you enjoyed watching the turtle worm farm. Bye for now.